Modern high-tech advances in medicine and health are of course the result of many centuries of development, research and experimentation, much of which took place in the Islamic world between the 9th and 14th centuries, a golden age of science. During this time, scholars in the Islamic world made huge contributions to medicine and created a body of knowledge that was tremendously important and influential around the world for many hundreds of years.
Why was the Islamic Golden Age called the Golden Age? The Abbasid Caliphs established the city of Baghdad in 762 CE. It became a center of learning and the hub of what is known as the Golden Age of Islam. A love of knowledge was evident in Baghdad. Scholars, philosophers, doctors, and other thinkers all gathered in this center of trade and cultural development. Academics, many of them fluent in Greek and Arabic, exchanged ideas and translated Greek texts into Arabic. Chief Muslim leaders after Muhammad's death were referred to as Caliphs. The era of the Abbasid Caliphs' construction and rule of Baghdad is known as the Golden Age of Islam. It was an era when scholarship thrived. So, which caliph is most associated with the Golden Age of Islam? And what was achieved in that period of Islam? Before we begin, make sure to smash the like button, subscribe to our channel, and click the notification bell for more amazing videos. The Islamic Golden Age refers to a period in the history of Islam traditionally dated from the 8th century to the 13th century, during which much of the historically Islamic world was ruled by various caliphates, and science, economic development, and cultural works flourished. This period is traditionally understood to have begun during the reign of the Abbasid Caliph Harun al-Rashid, 786 to 809, with the inauguration of the House of Wisdom in Baghdad, an intellectual center and public academy which increased in use during the reign of al-Rashid's son, al-Ma'mun. This is due to al-Ma'mun's persistent effort in recruiting scholars of all faiths and backgrounds, greatly encouraging intellectual pursuit. Specifically, al-Ma'mun initiated the translation movement, where scholars would translate the works and findings of the world into the Arabic language. These findings originated from ancient Mesopotamia, Rome, China, India, Persia, Egypt, Greece, and Byzantine civilizations, making it to Baghdad through the sponsorship of al-Ma'mun. Simultaneously, other Muslim dynasties, such as the Umayyads of al-Andalusan, the Fatimids of Egypt, were rivaling Baghdad with their own major intellectual centers, such as Cairo and Cordoba. These translations were kept in the House of Wisdom, including thousands of scholarly books of discoveries, inventions, philosophies, etc. That being said, the Islamic Empire was named the first civilization, bringing people as diverse as the Chinese, the Indians, Europeans, Africans, and people of the Middle East and North Africa together for the main purpose of academic involvement. The end of the age is variously given as 1258 with the Mongolian sack of Baghdad, or 1492, with the completion of the Christian reconquista of the Emirate of Granada in al-Andalus, Iberian Peninsula. During the Golden Age, the major Islamic capital cities of Baghdad, Cairo, and Cordoba became the main intellectual centers for science, philosophy, medicine, and education. The government heavily patronized scholars, and the best scholars and notable translators, such as Hunan ibn Ishaq, had salaries estimated to be the equivalent of those professional athletes today. The school of Nisibis, and later the school of Edessa, became centers of learning and transmission of classical wisdom. The House of Wisdom was a library, translation institute, and academy, and the Library of Alexandria and the Imperial Library of Constantinople housed new works of literature. What was discovered and invented during the Islamic Golden Age? For a glimpse into many innovations which were discovered at the time, we have provided the names of some of the most significant Islamic scholars of the time: al-Razi, Ibn al-Haytham, al-Khwarizmi, al-Zahrawi, al-Battani. One area that the Islamic world made significant contributions to the world was in mathematics. Most of their work would build on the great leaps and bounds made by Greek polymaths like Archimedes and Euclid. They were able, for example, to fully develop the decimal place value system. Islamic mathematicians also made the first systematic study of algebra and made huge advances in geometry and trigonometry. Here's some of the inventions. Horizontal plane windmills first appeared during the Islamic Golden Age. Whilst early forms of windmills were developed by Hero of Alexandria in the 1st century AD, horizontal plane windmills were first described by Ahmad Y. al-Hassan in the 10th century AD. These windmills, technically called Panama windmills, were made of 6 to 12 sails that were covered in reed matting or cloth. Like later true windmills, these ones were used to grind grain or draw up water from aquifers. Vertical windmills would begin to appear in Europe in the 12th century. It is unclear where these were developed from earlier Hanuman ones that became widespread throughout the Middle and Far East from the 10th century AD. Number 2, the Astrolab was refined by Muslim astronomers. Astrolabs are a blend between a planisphere, basic star chart mechanical computer, and dioptra, sighting tube. These mechanical navigational aids are very ancient devices indeed. From archaeological and literary evidence, they appear to have first been invented during the Hellenistic period in Greece between 220 and 150 BC. They were written about extensively by Theon of Alexandria in the 4th century AD as well. Astrolabs continue to be widely used throughout the Greek-speaking world throughout the Byzantine period, following the fall of the Roman Empire. During the medieval period, Muslim astronomers refined the technology further by adding angular scales to its design. They also added circles indicating azimuths on the horizon. The first person credited with this new innovation was the 8th century mathematician Muhammad al-Fazari. These modification devices were widely used thereafter, and were used for navigation and finding the Qibla in Mecca. Number 3. The oud was an Islamic invention. The oud, a short-necked lute-like pear-shaped stringed instrument, first appeared in the Islamic world during their Golden Age. For many musical historians, it is widely considered the forerunner to the European lute. Interestingly, that is not the end of the story. Ouds, in turn, might well have been derived from earlier Persian barbats, and other similar instruments have been used in the Middle East for thousands of years. Evidence of the first description of the oud comes from the 11th century Muslim musician al-Hasan ibn al-Hatim. Today, the oud is still widely used around the Middle East and is still a fond favorite amongst musicians around the world. Number 4. The marching military band might be an Islamic thing. Instruments like drums and bugles have been used by standing armies for millennia. In fact, drums and gongs in particular are mentioned in Sun Tzu's The Art of War, almost 2,500 years ago. The Roman legions were also noted for their use of horns performed by special professionals called anitors. But these were mainly used for giving instructions and orders to units on the battlefield, and not necessarily primarily for ceremonial purposes. The first example of an official military band for non-combat activities comes from the Ottoman army around the 11th century AD. Called a nedbet, these prototype military bands would eventually become the famed matura of the Ottoman Empire. Number 5. Magnifying glasses might also be an Islamic invention. The first written evidence of a device similar to a magnifying glass comes from Aristophanes' 5th century BC work, The Clouds. Within this document, he jokes about how lenses could be used to ignite tinder, were sold in pharmacies of the time. Pliny the Elder also later writes about glass globes filled with water would be used to cauterize wounds. Seneca also wrote about how such devices could be used to read letters, no matter how small or dim. But the first description of a convex lens used for magnification comes from the Book of Optics by Ibn al-Haytham in the 11th century AD. This book was later translated into Latin, which appears to have reintroduced the concept to Europe during the 13th century.